welcome back. Okay, so we're going to have part 2 of chapter 6 of the Secret of Shambhala, right? So we're up to part 2. Let's have a look and see what cards from the angels and ancestors. Let's see what cards are we going to reflect out while we finish up this chapter. What's important? Okay, High Priest. Intend and create. Interesting. It's all about what you intend to do and then create that path. Super, super important. What an interesting card to begin this reading with. Now let's have a look and see what else is really important to this chapter. What do we need to know about the intend and create? I think that's really important for us. So what else do we need to know? It's about seeing from a higher perspective. So it's really about raising our vibration and being able to see all the possibilities of where we're going. Remember to focus on what you intend and how to create it, and being able to see all the possible paths, the different perspectives, seeing the bigger picture from a higher perspective. What an interesting reading there. Okay, so this card here seems to be screaming out at me. So what card have we got here? Unleashing the wild within. Okay, I think it's about that trusting, allowing ourselves to just be, surrender to the path that lies ahead and what you intend to create, the allowing yourself to see things from a higher perspective, see the bigger picture and the whole thing, being able to surrender to it. That's what I get there from that, releasing that wild woman within, allowing yourself to actually see what's going on there. Okay, last card that we're focusing on. This card here seems to be screaming out to me. High Priestess. It's about harnessing the mystic power. So I think it's about harnessing all that lies within you. I love that reading in regards to this chapter, is what we've already seen so far. And I think where we're actually headed this is very much about the power that lies within us, the way that we control our own energy, our own thoughts, can be really important. Being able to surrender, to be able to see the possible paths of where we're going. Oh, I love this reading. Really, really interesting here. Indeed. Okay, so let's continue with this chapter. This part 2 of chapter 6. Okay, the next morning I was in a cab of an old 4-wheel drive truck, squeezed in between a herdsman and his 4-year-old son. Yin had known exactly what to do in spite of his pain. We had sneaked across several blocks to an old adobe brick house, where we were given a hot meal and a place to spend the night. He stayed up late talking to several men. I could only suppose that the men were members of Yin's secret group, but I asked no questions. We had risen early and minutes later the farm truck had driven up and I'd climbed aboard. We were now travelling along a snow-covered dirt road, circling ever higher into the mountains. As the truck bounced along, we turned a corner and reached an overlook where we could see the place where Yin and I had said goodbye. I asked the driver to slow the truck so I could see. To my horror, the whole area below was filled with military vehicles and soldiers. Wait a minute, I said to the driver. Yin may need help. We have to stop. The old man shook his head. Must go, must go. He and his son talk excitedly in Tibetan, occasionally looking at me as though they knew something I didn't. He sped up the truck and we travelled through a pass and started down through the mountains. A pang of fear erupted in my stomach. I was torn about what to do. What if Yin had escaped and needed me? On the other hand, I thought, I knew what Yin would have wanted. He would have insisted that I go on. I tried to keep my energy up, but part of me wondered if all the talk about gateways in Shambhala might turn out to be just a myth. And even if it was true, why would I be allowed to enter and not someone else? Like Jampa or Lama Rekton. Nothing made sense. I shrugged all those fears and those thoughts and tried to keep my energy high, gazing out at the snow-covered peaks. I watched closely as we travelled through several small towns, including Dorma. Finally, after eating a lunch of cold soup and dried tomatoes, I fell asleep for a long time. When I awoke, it was late afternoon, and large snowflakes were falling again, soon covering the roads with a fresh coating of whiteness. As we continued to travel, the terrain grew ever more mountainous, and I could tell the air was growing thinner. Approaching in the distance was yet another tall range of mountains. That must be the Kulin range, I thought, the one Yin had mentioned. Part of me continued to disbelieve that all this was happening, but another knew it was, and that I was alone now, facing the monolithic Chinese presence with all its soldiers and atheistic skepticism. From behind us I heard the low drone of a helicopter. My heart began to pound, but I kept my alertness. The herdsman seemed oblivious to the threat and drove on for another 30 minutes, then smiled and pointed up ahead. Through the falling snow I could see the darker outlines of a large stone structure sitting atop one of the first ridges. Several walls on the left side were collapsed. Behind the monastery rose huge spars of snow-covered rock. The monastery was 3 or 4 stories tall, even though its roof had long since rotted away, and I looked closely for a moment for any sign of people or movement. I saw nothing. It seemed to have been completely abandoned for a long time. At the base of the mountain, 500 feet below the monastery, the truck stopped and the man pointed up towards the ruined structure. I hesitated, looking out at the blowing snow. He gestured again, urging me on with his excited expression. I grabbed the pack Yin had prepared for me from the back of the truck. I started up the hill. The temperature was growing slightly colder, but I hoped that with the tent and sleeping bag I would not freeze to death. But what about the soldiers? I watched the truck move out of sight and listened carefully, hearing nothing but the wind. I looked around and found a rock stairway up the hill and started to climb. After about 200 feet I stopped and looked back towards the south. From here I could see nothing but white mountains for miles. As I approached the monastery, I could now see that it actually wasn't on a hill of its own, but stood on a large precipice extending out from the mountain behind it. The path led right to the opening that was once a large door, and I carefully walked in. Large, huge stones lay scattered around the dirt floor, and I was facing a long hallway that ran the length of the structure. I walked down the hall past several rooms that opened up on both sides of me. Finally, I came to a larger room that had a doorway to the back side of the monastery. In fact, half of its rear wall had collapsed, and more stones, some of them as big as tables, lay on the ground outside. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a movement near the collapsed wall. I froze. What was that? Cautiously, I walked to the opening and looked outside in all directions. It was about 100 feet from the door to the sheer rock face of the mountain. No one seemed to be around. As I continued to look, I saw another vague movement, also out of the corner of my eye. This time it was further away, near the base of the mountain face. A chill ran through me. What was going on? What was I seeing? I thought about grabbing my pack and running back down the hill, but I decided against it. I was definitely frightened, but my energy was remaining strong. I focused as best as I could through the falling snow. and headed for the cliffs where I thought I'd seen the movement. When I arrived, I could find nothing. The cliff walls were laced with vertical crevices, including one very large, one that at first looked like a narrow cave. On closer inspection, I saw it was only several feet deep, too shallow for anyone to hide and filled with snow. I looked around for footprints, and although the snow was 10 to 12 inches thick, I could find none but my own. The snow was falling much harder now, so I walked back to the monastery and found a corner of the room that still had an overhang of stone in place that protected me from the snow and wind. A pang of hunger hit me, and I crunched some carrots as I broke out the small gas stove and heated some freeze-dried vegetable soup Yin had placed in my pack. As it was simmering, I thought about what was happening. There was only about an hour left until dark, and I had no idea why I was up here. I looked through my pack and found no flashlight of any kind. Why hadn't Yin packed one? The gas in the stove wouldn't last through the night. I had to find some firewood or yak dung. My mind was already playing tricks on me, I thought. What might happen if I have to spend the entire night up here in total darkness? What if these old walls began to fall in the wind? As soon as I had that thought, I heard a crumbling sound at the far end of the monastery. I walked out to the hall, and just as I looked, I saw a huge stone crash to the ground. "Jesus!" I said out loud. "I have to get out of here." I turned off the stove and grabbed the other gear and ran out of the bleak into the blowing snow. I quickly realized I would have to find shelter, so I ran back to the mountain cliffs, hoping I'd missed a crevice or overhang large enough to camp in. When I reached the cliffs, I searched in vain for an opening. None of the crevices were deep enough. The wind howled. At one point, a huge clump of snow fell from one of the rocks and landed at my feet. I looked up at the tons of accumulating snow that was lining the sides of the mountain above me. What if there was an avalanche here? In my mind's eye, I could see the snow rolling down the mountain. Again, as soon as I had that thought, I heard a rumbling sound above me, and to the right. I grabbed the gear and ran back towards the monastery, just as a thunderous roar filled the air and snow rolled down the mountainside 50 feet away. I ran as fast as I could and collapsed into the snow, halfway back to the monastery, terrified. Why was this all happening? With that thought, a memory of Yin came to my mind. He was saying, at these levels of energy, the effect of your expectations is immediate. You will be tested. I sat up. Of course! This was the test. I wasn't controlling my fear images. I ran back to the old monastery and ducked inside. The temperature was falling rapidly, and I knew I had to risk staying inside. Setting my gear down, I spent several minutes imagining the stone staying in place. A shiver of cold ran through me. Now I thought I have to go searching about something about this cold. I pictured myself sitting beside a warm fire. Fuel. I had to find some fuel. I walked out to look over the rest of the monastery. It only reached the hallway when I stopped cold in my tracks. I could smell smoke. The smoke is burning wood. Now what? Slowly I walked down the hallway, looking in each room as I came to it, finding nothing. When there was only one room left, I peered around the doorway. In the corner was a burning campfire and a store of wood. I stepped in and looked around. No one was there. No one was here. This room had another doorway leading outside and more of a roof overhead. It felt much warmer. But who built this fire? I walked to the outside opening and looked around at the snow. Still no tracks. I was turning around, heading for the door, when in the half-light I saw a tall figure standing at the edge of the doorway. I tried to focus on him directly, but I could see him only at the peripheral edges of my sight. I realized it was the same man I'd seen in the snow when Yin had pushed me from the jeep. I tried to focus on him directly again, and he vanished. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and the chill went through me. I couldn't believe what was happening. Cautiously, I walked through the doorway and peered down the hall in both directions. Seeing nothing, I thought again about fleeing the monastery and going down the mountain, but I knew the temperature was still falling fast, and if I did, I would likely freeze to death. My only option was to go get my stuff and stay by this fire. So I retrieved my gear and returned, peering nervously around every corner. As I sat down, a gust of wind whipped the fire and blew ash everywhere, and I watched the flames for a moment as they caught back up. I had imagined a fire and then it had manifested, but it was too much to believe that my field could be that strong. There was only one explanation. I was being helped. The figure I saw was a Dakini. As eerie as it all was, that realization eased my mind, and I threw more wood on the fire and finished my soup, then unpacked my sleeping bag. After a few minutes, I lay down and fell into a deep sleep. Okay, that's it for today. Don't forget to check the links down below. Check the links on my channel. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you know when the next video will be uploaded. Take care, and blessed be.